The brand still smokes where it touched her forehead. Serena is 26 years old, and she can smell her own flesh burning, can feel the iron letters fug searing into skin that will never heal cleanly. He can hear through the ringing in her ears the laughter of the men who held her down while the branding iron did its work. She was, until 14 days ago, a household slave in the villa of Senator Lucius Valerius Maximus, educated, trusted, permitted to manage correspondence and accounts, treated with something approaching respect by masters who valued her intelligence. Now she kneels in a stone courtyard at the Laurentine labor facility, her forehead marked forever as a runaway, her wrists chained to a post that has held hundreds of women before her, waiting to learn what specific punishment the administrator of this place has designed for slaves who dared to seek freedom. The brand on her forehead reads Fug Fugitivis, the Latin word that will define her existence until death. It is the first mark. She has been told there will be others. Around her, other women wait in similar positions, some freshly branded like herself, others bearing older marks that have scarred into permanent disfigurement. Some have the hollow eyes of those who have been in this facility for months or years. Some are new enough to still weep. One, chained to the post beside her, has stopped responding to anything at all. Her mind apparently departed from a body that the facility still claims ownership of. A man approaches the courtyard. He is perhaps 45 years old, with the bearing of someone who has spent decades overseeing the destruction of human beings and has grown comfortable with the work. His name, she has learned, is Quintus Servilius Drusus, and he is the administrator of this facility, the man who determines which women go to the quarries, which to the mines, which to purposes that the other women speak of only in whispers. The senator's runaway, Drusus says, stopping before her. The one who managed 12 days of freedom before the slave catchers found her. He crouches down to examine her face, tilting her chin upward with a casual cruelty. You should have known better. A household slave, educated, comfortable you had more than most slaves ever receive. And you threw it away for 12 days of freedom that ended here. I had reasons. They all have reasons. The reasons don't matter. What matters is that you ran. You were caught, and now you belong to this facility until we determine what to do with you. He releases her chin and stands. Tell me your reasons anyway. I am curious what motivated such stupidity. My daughter. She was sold 6 months ago to a buyer in Ostia. I ran to find her. Your daughter. Drusus's expression shifts slightly, not to sympathy, but to something more calculating. A child born in slavery, sold separately from her mother. This happens constantly. Slaves do not have families in any legal sense. You knew this. I knew this. I also knew that my daughter is 8 years old and was sold to a man whose reputation suggested purposes I could not accept. Could not accept, he laughs. You are property. Acceptance is not required of you. Your daughter is property. What her owner does with her is his concern, not yours. She is my child. She is his slave. You were Senator Valerius's slave. The relationship you imagine between mother and child does not exist in law. It barely exists in practice. He turns to the guards flanking him. Mark her for the special assignment. She has spirit. That will make her useful for the purposes I have in mind. The guards move forward. Serena feels hands gripping her arms, feels the chains being released from the post, feels herself being lifted and dragged toward a doorway that leads into the facility's interior. What purposes? She asks, forcing her voice to remain steady. What special assignment? Drusus smiles. It is the smile of someone who enjoys delivering bad news. You will learn soon enough. The women who are assigned to it generally last 3 to 4 weeks. The strong ones sometimes manage 6. You look strong. Perhaps you will set a record. She is dragged through the doorway. The last thing she sees before the darkness swallows her Is Drusus walking toward the next branded woman in the courtyard, preparing to deliver another judgment? What you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from the histories that document Roman slavery as an economic institution. The historians who wrote about Roman slavery focused on legal frameworks, the property status of slaves, the rights of owners, the mechanisms by which slaves might earn or purchase freedom. They documented the philosophical debates about whether slavery was natural or conventional, the economic calculations that made slave labor profitable, the administrative systems that tracked millions of enslaved people across the empire. But they did not document what happened to slaves who ran. Running was the ultimate crime a slave could commit. It represented rejection of the entire system, denial of the owner's authority, theft of the owner's property, the slave's own body, and dangerous precedent that might encourage others. Rome could not function if slaves believed escape was possible. Therefore, slaves who ran had to be punished in ways that eliminated any illusion of possibility. Tonight you will learn what those punishments actually involved. You will learn about the facilities that processed runaway slaves, the brands that marked them forever, the assignments that destroyed them systematically, the purposes that Rome preferred not to discuss openly. You will learn about the special assignments, that certain facilities maintained work so brutal that it served as example, so degrading that it stripped away whatever humanity the slaves had retained, so lethal that 3 to 4 weeks was considered a normal survival time. You will learn about Serena, who ran to find her daughter and found herself in a facility designed to ensure that no slave ever ran again. Subscribe if you want to understand the full horror of what it meant to seek freedom in the Roman world. Comment below telling me where you are watching from. Because Serena is about to learn what the special assignment involves, and I am going to tell you exactly what Rome did to women who dared to dream of escape. But before I describe what happened in that facility, I need to take you back. I need to explain how Roman slavery actually functioned, why running was considered the ultimate transgression, and what systems existed to punish those who committed it. Because you cannot understand what Serena faced without understanding the system that made her punishment necessary. Roman slavery was the foundation of Roman civilization. By the 1st century AD, slaves constituted perhaps 1/3 of Italy's population, millions of human beings, whose labor made possible every aspect of Roman life. Slaves worked the farms that fed the cities. Slaves staffed the households that maintained elite comfort. Slaves operated the mines that produced the metals that funded the empire. Slaves built the roads, cleaned the streets, served in the shops, crewed the ships. There was no aspect of Roman existence that did not depend on slave labor. The system's stability depended on slaves accepting their status as permanent and inescapable. This acceptance was maintained through a combination of incentives and terror. The incentives included the possibility of manumission, the legal process by which slaves could be freed, either purchased by the slave or granted by the owner. Many slaves did eventually gain freedom, and this possibility gave others hope that good behavior might eventually be rewarded. But the terror was equally important. Slaves who did not accept their status, who resisted, who ran these slaves, had to be destroyed so visibly and so completely that others would never consider following their example. The punishment for running was designed not primarily to hurt the individual runaway, but to send a message to every slave who witnessed or heard about it. The first punishment was the brand. Fug, burned into the forehead, marked a runaway permanently. The letters could not be hidden, could not be removed, would identify the slave as a runner for the rest of their life. Even if a branded slave somehow escaped again, the brand meant they could never pass as free. They would be recognized, captured, returned, and punished more severely for the second offense. After branding came assignment, runaway slaves were not simply returned to their original owners. They were sent to facilities that specialized in processing runaways, places where the punishment could be administered systematically, where examples could be made, where the terror could be maximized. These facilities varied in their specific functions. Some processed slaves for sale to the mines, where life expectancy was measured in months. Some trained slaves for gladiatorial schools, where they would serve as practice targets for fighters who needed live opponents. Some maintained labor camps, where the work was designed to be fatal, where slaves were literally worked to death as punishment for seeking freedom. And some maintained special assignments purposes that the documentation rarely specified, but that survivors' testimony made horrifyingly clear. The Laurentine Labor Facility was one of these. Located south of Rome, it processed hundreds of runaway slaves each year. Most were sent to the quarries or the agricultural labor pools. But some, the ones who had demonstrated particular spirit, who had run for reasons that suggested they might run again, who needed to serve as particularly vivid examples, these were assigned to purposes that the facility's administrators had refined over decades of practice. This was the system that now held Serena. This was the facility that would determine her fate. This was the horror that awaited women who dared to seek freedom in the Roman world. Now let us return to Serena, who has been dragged into the facility's interior and deposited in a cell that will be her home for however many weeks she survives. The cell was small, perhaps 8 feet by 6 feet, with a stone floor, stone walls, and an iron grate that served as both door and window. There was no furniture except a thin pallet in one corner and a bucket in another. A single oil lamp, mounted outside the grate where she could not reach it, provided dim illumination that would never be extinguished. She would never know true darkness here, never be able to hide what was done to her in shadow. She was not alone. Another woman occupied the cell older than Serena, perhaps 35, with the brand on her forehead and additional marks on her arms that suggested months of the punishment Serena was only beginning to experience. "New arrival," the woman said. Her voice was flat, emptied of emotion. "Special assignment?" "That's what he said, Drusus." "Then you have perhaps 4 weeks. I'm at 6. I'm apparently exceptional." The woman laughed, and the sound held no humor. "My name was Calpurnia. Now I'm just number 47. They'll give you a number, too." "What is the special assignment?" Calpurnia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was even flatter than before. "During the day, we work the quarry. Stone breaking, hauling, the same as the regular labor assignments. That part is hard, but survivable. Strong women can do quarry work for years. And the rest, the nights are different. The facility generates income from the women assigned to special purposes. There are men who pay for access to runaways, men who enjoy certain things that they cannot do to slaves, who must be returned to functioning households." The implication was clear. Serena had understood it from the whispered conversations she had overheard, from the expressions on the faces of women who had been assigned before her. How often? Every night. Sometimes multiple men in a single night. The administrator maximizes revenue. We are damaged goods anyway. No one expects us to be returned in usable condition. And that's what kills women in 4 weeks? The combination kills them. Quarry work during the day breaks the body. The nights break what's left. Most women stop eating after the 2nd week. They stop sleeping after the 3rd. By the 4th week, they simply stop. Serena absorbed this. The horror was not abstract. It was specific, immediate, scheduled to begin tonight. She had perhaps 12 hours to think, to plan, to find some way to survive what was coming. "You said you're at 6 weeks. You've survived longer than most. How?" Calpurnia looked at her with something that might have been curiosity. "Why do you want to survive? Most women here have nothing to survive for. Their families are dead or scattered. Their hope is gone."